Welcome back to part 2 of the Lawrence Magondu case. Lawrence was a renowned land dealer in Nairobi who was found murdered in Kitengela on the 4th of February in the year 2000. If you missed out on part 1, I've linked it up here, so please pass by there first and then come back to this one. We left off at where they arrested a group of 12 on suspicion of murdering Lawrence Magondu. They arrested the former Lands Commissioner, Wilson Gashanja, his wife, Elizabeth Gashanja, her siblings, Rose Muruateto and Francis Muruateto, and a group of 8 others. So, the trial against the 12 began that year, presided over by Justice Msaga Mbogoli. The prosecution presented its case in a bid to implicate all the accused persons. They lined up a good number of witnesses to support their case. Rose Muruateto, during this trial, told of how it all began. She testified that a call she received from a guy identifying himself as Majimoto in December of 1999 was what fueled this entire case. The guy told Rose Muruateto that he had been contracted by Lawrence Magondu to kill her brother-in-law, that is Wilson Gashanja, over an unknown reason. According to Rose, she went and told the Gashanjas about this disturbing call. That is when a plan was laid out to have Mr. Magondu killed instead. Now they only had to find people to do the dirty work for them. On 26th of January in the year 2000, Elizabeth Gashanja went into the bank accompanied by her siblings Rose Muruateto and Francis Muruateto. She withdrew and gave the siblings a total of 1 million shillings from her kids' savings account. She also had earlier on asked Rose to cash checks worth 600,000 Kenyan shillings. The Muruatetos during trial said that this money was meant to pay the hired killers. They insisted that Wilson Gashanja was also in on the plan. However, when Elizabeth Gashanja herself took the stand, she testified that she had indeed withdrawn the said amount and given it to Francis and Rose Muruateto. But she claimed that she did all that without her husband's knowledge. She also denied that the money was meant to pay Magondu's killers, saying that it was meant to help out her siblings who were struggling financially. Francis Muruateto was said to be the person who found, hired, and paid Thirimbo the hitman. At first, Francis denied having any knowledge of Thirimbo, but evidence showed that he called Thirimbo 7 times on the day that Magondu died. Francis was cornered and therefore had to admit to what the evidence was already showing. The mystery deepened as they delved deeper into the motive behind the murder. It came out that Mr. Wilson Gashanja and Lawrence Magondu had been good friends, but after some time, their relationship had deteriorated. It also emerged that Magondu was allegedly being used by the Gashanjas to swindle public property. But where did it all go wrong? Could they have gotten into a deal that didn't go as planned? Conversely, the defense contended that the evidence against their client, Wilson Gashanja, was all circumstantial evidence. They managed to instill reasonable doubt in the prosecution's case. Wilson Gashanja, who was the main suspect, was very quickly released after the court ruled that there was no evidence linking him to the death of Lawrence Magondu. Also released with him were 3 other suspects. But his wife, her siblings, and 5 others remained on trial. No one knows why the trial court discarded the evidence by the Muruatetos, who had said that Wilson knew and was a part of the plan. It could be argued that maybe they were throwing Wilson under the bus just to save their sister Elizabeth. If that was the case, then they failed terribly because Elizabeth took the stand and defended her husband, saying that he knew nothing about the money paid out of their children's account. The court chose to believe Elizabeth, ultimately acquitting Wilson Gashanja. And so the rest of the suspects were left to face the music. The roles each of the suspects played in this murder was very clear. Anna Ngonyo and Wilson Thirimbu were the guys who lured Magondu to his death under the pretense of buying land. Anna Ngonyo was described as having a seemingly innocent demeanor, which helped deceive Magondu into trusting her. Wilson Thirimbu Mwangi was suspected to be the hitman who was paid to execute the murder. He had in turn hired the rest of the suspects to help put the plan in action. David Njuguna, Stephen Kagia, and Stephen Wambua also played a role in the conspiracy, kidnapping, and the murder of Lawrence Githinji. The payout money was said to have come from Elizabeth Gashanja down to her siblings, the Muratetos, and eventually to the killers. After 3 years of trial, they would all know their fate. In March 2003, Justice Msaga Mbogoli found the 8 accused persons, including Elizabeth Gashanja and her siblings, guilty of murder. 7 of the accused persons were sentenced to death. One of the main suspects, Anna Ngonyo, who had lured Magondu into his death, narrowly escaped the death sentence herself. The court was shocked to discover that Anna Ngonyo was 6 months pregnant at the time of sentencing. An investigation into how Anna Ngonyo got pregnant while in custody was ordered. There was suspicion that she may have had an illicit contact with her co-accused, Wilson Thirimbu, during their time in remand. Ngonyo's pregnancy became a pivotal factor in her sentencing. The judge, Justice Msaga Mbogoli, stated, "The innocent life in your womb has saved your day." She got life imprisonment instead of a death sentence imposed on her co-accused. But their story was still far from over. After spending 9 years in prison, Elizabeth Gashanja appealed the trial court's decision. She was not willing to take that harsh punishment lying down. She was represented by her lawyer, Professor Githu Muigai. To everyone's shock, in 2011, she was acquitted and released from prison after a successful appeal. The reasoning the Court of Appeal gave was that, as much as there was strong suspicion that Elizabeth may have been involved in the financing of this conspiracy, that remained as only suspicion. There was no tangible evidence to show that she knew that whatever money she gave out to her siblings was to facilitate the murder of Lawrence Magondu. The court said that it grappled with uncovering the ultimate motive of the murder. Was it a hit before being hit? Was it a deal gone bad? Financial gain? They just couldn't get to the bottom of it. And because of that, the Gashanjas were now free. In 2017, after 14 years in jail, Francis Mruatetu and Wilson Thirimbu were back in court. They wanted to challenge the constitutionality of their sentences. Ultimately, they got the Supreme Court to declare the mandatory death sentence unconstitutional in 2017. And so, all the death sentences previously handed were commuted to life sentences even for the other suspects. This leading to the precedents today, the fact that mandatory death sentences in Kenya are unconstitutional. And so that's where the case stands as of today. In short, the actual killers are known, and all the clues they provided led to the person or persons allegedly pulling the plug. The trial court found evidence of guilt, but the Court of Appeal threw all that away and set free the main suspects. The rest of the suspects were given death sentences that were later commuted to life sentences. The murder of Lawrence Magondu was very hard on his family. His beloved wife died shortly after him, leaving behind their 4 children. His kids told case files that they are still chasing several pieces of land belonging to their father. He had many pieces, most of which were unknown to them. They say that it hasn't been easy because they get death threats whenever they try to follow up and recover their father's properties. They believe that most have been sold or illegally acquired. It might be notable to mention that Wilson Gashanja, a long-serving lands commissioner in the Moi era, left office in 1999. But ever since, he has been defending multiple land grab cases filed against him all over the country, from Diani to Eldoret, Nairobi, Nakuru, and a few other jurisdictions. There are also many cases filed against him by the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, or the EACC, as it seeks to trace and recover public land illegally allocated to private developers. It is believed that Wilson Gashanja grabbed public land, subdivided it, sold it, and even got fresh ownership documents for the buyers. In 2008, for example, he was found guilty in one of the cases filed by the EACC for aiding in the grabbing of land belonging to the Kenya School of Law. As recent as June 2022, Wilson Gashanja was arrested and charged with aiding in the illegal acquisition of more public land by private developers. He is said to have over 300 pending cases. As you can see, he got himself entangled in quite a lot of mess. But all in all, in our main case of today, in the murder of Lawrence Githinji, he was acquitted for lack of evidence. His wife was free too after having spent 9 years behind bars. But the rest of the players were not so lucky. So that brings us to the end of the Lawrence Magondu case. Do you guys think that justice was really served in this one? Please leave your comments down below because I would really like to hear your thoughts on that. And as I sign off, please don't forget to subscribe, to like, and to share this episode with other true crime junkies like yourself. See you right here on the next one.